Today on Miss Katie's lesson, we're going to learn how to add and subtract in different bases using a few of the different methods that we have learned earlier in class. Now let's get started. So to start off with, we're going to add 53 in base 6 and 44 in base 6 using base blocks. Now remember, in base 10, we usually use a unit for 1, a rod for 10, and a flat for 100. In base 6, we use a unit for 1 still, but then a rod for 6 and a flat for 36. So let's start with 53. 36 goes into 53 once, right? So we only do 1 flat. And then after that, we have 17 left that we need to handle. So how many times does 6 go into 17? Only twice, because 3 times would be 18, right? So we add 2 rods, and then after that we have 5 left that we need to take care of. 5 is 1 less than 6, so we just write 5 units. And altogether that's going to equal 53 in base 6. Now let's move on to 44 in base 6. Again, 36 goes only into 44 once, so we do 1 flat. And then we have 8 left that we need to handle after that. So 6 goes into 8 only once, so we add 1 rod, and then there's 2 units left over, and that equals 44 in base 6. So now, to equal it, we add all these together. So 2 bases of 36, that is going to give us 72. Plus 1, 2, 3 rods. And that's going to give us 18. Plus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 units. Which is obviously going to give us just 7. Now, we can turn, let's do this. We can turn this group into another rod, right? And then just have 1 left over. So really, we have 24 and then 1 left over. So when we tally all those up, we get 97 in base 6. Don't forget the base 6. So for our second example, we're going to try doing the lattice method and adding 2 numbers that are in base 4. Now we're going to do 312 in base 4 and 203 in base 4. And I already drew our lattices down here. So let's start with 3 plus 2. We know that that's 5, and 5 is higher than 4. And since we're base 4, we subtract 4 from 5, and that gives us 1. So we put a 1 down here and a 0 because that's a single digit. But then we also have to carry a 1 over, right? So then we have 1 plus 0 is just 2, and that's under 4, so we don't have to change it. And then we have another 3 plus 2, which we already know 5 minus 4 is 1. So we'll put a 1 there. And then we can't forget to carry the 1. There's nothing over here, so it stays at 1. Now remember, with lattice, it looks a little bit funky, but we add diagonally after this. So 1 is the only one in this column. In this column we have 2, 1, and 1. So our answer is going to be 1,121 in base 4. For our third example, we're going to go the traditional route, but only because we're using base 12, and these look a little bit different, right? So in base 12, the symbol T equals 10, and E equals 11. So we add just the same, but we keep in mind these keys, right? So we'll start with 5 plus E, which we know E equals 11, so really it's 5 plus 11, and that equals 16. So we know 16 is higher than 12. and that's going to give us 4 left. So we put a 4 down here and carry our 1. Then after that we have 1 plus 10 plus 4, which is going to give us 15. Again, 15 is higher than 12. And that's going to give us a 3. So we write 3 down here and then carry the 1 one more time and go to 1. So that equals 134 in base 12. So for our example 4, we're going to look at base blocks again, but while using subtraction. And we're going to be doing this in base 8. So remember, the unit equals 1, rod equals 8, and the flat equals 64. So we're going to be doing 52 in base 8 minus 35 in base 8. So I already started us off with doing all of our base blocks. We know that 8 can only go into, first of all, 64 can't go into 52. So we're not using any flats. So we know that 8 can go into 52 6 times, which equals 48. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rods plus 4, because there's 4 left over after that. And then for 35, 64 doesn't go into 35 either. So we need to do 4 rods, which equals 32, plus 3 left over. So now we're going to subtract. So since we have 4 over here, we need to take 4 out of here. So I'm going to do this, cancel those out. So we only have 2 left after that. Then, since there's 3 over here, we're going to take 3 out of here. And then we only have 1 left. So that gives us 2 rods plus 1 unit. And we know a rod is 8, so 8 plus 8 is 16, plus 1 is 17. We can't forget to put it in base 8. So for our last example, we're going to go the traditional route again, but with subtraction. And this time we're using base 12. So remember, t equals 10 and e equals 11 in base 12. So our question is t3 in base 12 minus 5e in base 12. And this one's a little bit tricky because we can't take 11 away from 3, right? We're going to have to borrow, and that looks a little bit different than it does in our regular base 10 system. So we'll take 1 off of our t and give us 9, right? Because t is actually 10. And instead of adding a 10 to the 3 to make it 13, we're going to add a 12 because we're in base 12. So 3 plus 12 equals 15. So now we have 11 minus 15, that's going to give us 4. I'll write a little base down here. And then 9 minus 5 is going to give us another 4. So our answer then is 44 in base 12.